Good morning, my dear friends from across different parts of the country. Bar Association of India, which has been nurtured over decades by the tallest leaders of the bar, with a vision that the legal fraternity has to play, will play in the affairs of the country. I find many young minds here, and it's a good sign that you engage your time and mind and invest them in the pursuit of the noblest of elements of the legal profession. To ask me to talk about Mr. Nariman is like asking a squirrel to talk about an elephant. And I'm standing here not as an attorney general, but a fellow traveler in the legal profession who has watched, as I said, the tallest figures of the bar participating in the dialogues in the Supreme Court. I call them dialogues, the highest level of argument and in a sense dialogues with the court. So I have witnessed many such tall figures in the recounting from 1979 when I entered the Supreme Court, and much later when you become a little more mature about how to learn from what others have dialogued with the court. When you're young, you have a certain perspective. As you grow a little mature and your ability to catch and capture the nuances of the dialogue, then you become richer yourself. So in that sense, I could probably gather the most important elements of how the legal fraternity's role in dialoguing with the court and persuading the court to have what called evolve the public reasoning part of the legal fraternity's role. There I say that I have learned enormously from many of the tall members of the bar, more particularly Mr. Nariman. Bar room number 2 wrote an unwritten obituary the day after Mr. Nariman left us. Bar room number 2 was, I thought was vacant. From a chamber, I went into bar room number 2 where I used to sit. I thought there was something about that place where the loss was felt in more than one sense. So all of us have felt that loss in more than one sense. And many of us who moved very closely with him, not only in professional matter but otherwise, and trying to catch the best of one thoughts which could be shared while we are not in the court but outside the court, in libraries, in coffee rooms, or even otherwise congregations like this. So I say that I am therefore still a squirrel who is called upon to talk about an elephant. Now the other day when the Supreme Court full court reference was about Mr. Nariman, I thought I will read out 2 paragraphs of my address before the court, which I think is probably apt not only to Mr. Nariman, to many, many tall leaders of the bar, and I am indeed happy to be today in the midst of very eminent members of the bar from different parts of the country, those who are in the dais, whom I know very well, who have performed and who have carried the what called the legacies of the role of the bar to higher levels. And I think that's the ultimate duty and responsibility of being a lawyer. And this is what is said in the court. With your permission, I will read out a couple of paragraphs. While liberty may lie in the hearts of all humans, it must also be secured to all and at all times. Resilient social norms and constitutional orders must also remain intact in the midst of waves of social and political misadventures. Constitutional architects who can dig deep and wide enough and who can transcend partisan ideological demands or political party affiliations and stand by these values occupy that sphere of liberty architects. Mr. Fali Nariman was one such architect. When we gather to pay homage to such giants who have not only enriched our jurisprudence, stood as an icon and taught the highest values of the profession, but showed us the courage and conviction to stand by values in other public callings, we find it difficult to gather our chronicles about them and to compress them in a very short while. Talk of the march of the Indian constitutional law without reference to Mr. Fali Nariman would be like marching with a flagpole without a flag. Having said that, when Prashant Kumar came the other day to have some exchanges of thoughts on some events to be in due course of time, so he gave to me the complete compilation of the President's page of the Indian lawyer from 1991 to 2005. Before I read out few parts of that President's page, which Mr. Nariman has eloquently penned over a period of time, today morning I thought, let me pen my few thoughts. And I sat down on my table around 8:30 in the morning and I wrote a handwritten piece, right? Let me take your permission. An extempore speech is always good because it receives the attention more than a written text speech. But I pardon you and take pardon from you, and let me read out few parts of what I wrote in the morning. Mr. Nariman was his own great instructor, and of him it may be well be said, his attainments in learning were nourished for the most part by the solitary vigil of his own genius. It seems nature gave him both a legal mind and a constitutional cultural mind. If the international community of arbitration lawyers and writers felt persuaded to call Mr. Nariman as an esteemed member of the global legal community and as their friend, it was owing to the fullest investment of his intellect, experience, insights, and above all, his felt sense of justice. The warm felicitations bestowed upon him in the rich collection of essays in his honor in the International Arbitration volume stand out as a global voice on his untiring contributions as a legal enthusiast ever ready to plow the world of justice. More than 8 volumes of memorials and writings about great American lawyers have been published. These are not mere hagiographies. They contribute to the connection between the bench, the bar, and the people. We are ready to undertake this engagement. I wish the Bar Association of India undertakes the engagement about the great lawyers from the entire vast north to west, south, east to west, and those unexplored areas of the Indian bar. Those of us who feel the inner fire of exploring the social world of ideas and institutions, the never-dying persuasions to plumb all territories of mind and the world, to profess and to propagate ends of justice, are truly the engineers of law. Mr. Nariman belonged to the long line of those brave in heart and strong in soul who glimpsed truths and delivered them in ecstasies of the mind. His all contribution to the Indian advocate, I would call them ecstasies of the mind in one sense. His presidentship of the Bar Association of India from 1991 to 2010 meant not only that there were no competitions, but that the idea of competition was never born. And so was his stature and his sailor-like qualities. Walter Raleigh was responsible for setting up the colony of Virginia in the United States. If this word can be extended to exploring unexplored fields, Mr. Nariman was an explorer. His contribution to the two Indian advocates from 1991 to 2005, as I said, present is battling those important themes of law, justice, constitution, legal fraternities, perennial duties, and asking questions about balancing conflicts and opposites in the world of doing justice. A collection of these which editorial comments would be a great piece of legal writing to be consumed by students and lawyers alike. When we talk today of the role of the legal fraternity and the enviable task we need to perform in the midst of challenging social, political, global, and other issues and I think it's important for us to gather how such people like Mr. Nariman were able to commit themselves to single-minded pursuit of how to enrich the quality of being a lawyer. To enrich the quality of being a lawyer is not merely a courtroom exercise. It's something beyond that. So unless you are truly committed to pursuing the depth and the width of law and its role in contemporary times, which are far more different from when Mr. Nariman entered the bar, I think it's important for us to look at what one could have done in the past 50, 75 years and look at what one could gather from these contributions and what we could do. So a tribute like this is not merely a morning coffee day issue. It's something beyond that. It's something which is, for me, emotional, intellectual, and also what one may call the compendium of perspectives on what one human being could be as a lawyer. So let us look at the role, the lives, and the contributions made by such tall figures from more than one angle. We may talk about the courtroom genius of Mr. Nariman, as people used to talk about the courtroom genius of Mr. Palkiwala. Many of us have a courtroom geniuses. I find my lawyers, my very eminent lawyers friends on the dais were courtroom geniuses. And many of us would like to be that. But as long as we remain only that and we don't go beyond the courtroom genius, in a way a courtroom genius also probably comprehend how do you look at the society at large and what impact and what I do as a lawyer will have on the society. So all these very important questions, I think, will enter the minds of the legal fraternity today. And that's the only way, perhaps, as members of the Bar Association of India, would be paying rich tributes to the memory of Mr. Nariman. I'll just conclude by reading a couple of his writings in the Indian Advocate, which I thought was very telling. In one of his very concerned pieces on the role of the legal fraternity, he talked about the role of auditors in the corporate sector. Now, it's very, in his own inimitable style, he writes, brings a very commonplace incident with humor, satire, and all that, which is very Nariman's forte. Now, in this article written in 2003, he talks about the auditor as a watchdog. And he quotes the Conan Doyle story. Let me read it. And the conversation between Sherlock Holmes and Conan Doyle. For more than a century, the auditor had been characterized as a watchdog, not a bloodhound. A nice picturesque expression providing a smokescreen for excusing liability. What happens when the watchdog does not watch? The answer is contained in that much publicized extract on one of the Conan Doyle stories. Quote, is there any point to which you would wish to draw my attention as the chief of police? Yes, says Sherlock Holmes, to the curious incident of the dog in the night time. But the dog did nothing in the night time, said the police chief. Oh, that was a curious incident, is the now famous response. The dog doing nothing at the right time is what is curious about the dog doing nothing. Too often I regret to say the watchdogs of large corporations have done little or nothing, either in the night time or in the daytime. Prompting one Canadian judge to say that the auditor as a watchdog is obliged to bark at least once in a while. We are not called upon to bark. We are more than the night dogs. We are more than night dogs who would not bark at all. So he says that, first goes further and says about how, the next page, he writes about American Bar Association Task Force on Corporate Responsibility in his final report urging changes in corporate governance policies to create a new culture of corporate responsibility assessing constructive skepticism and active independent oversight of corporate executives. I just substitute cooperation with society, you get what the legal fraternity may have to do. And he says it's wishful thinking to believe that the codes of ethics will help to change things. They never have, neither for judges nor for lawyers or other professionals. Codes have been tried in various jurisdictions and found to be of little practical utility. I suppose each one of us are codes unto themselves. And that's what I gather from Mr. Nariman's life. And he talks about how the invisible role, he says in the same article further, the phrase adding value is best defined with reference to the vision of a great lawyer, John Davis, who way back in 1946 addressed the Association of Bars of the City of New York with these memorable words. I quote, "True, we build no bridges, we raise no towers, we construct no pictures. There is a little of all that we do with the eyes of man can see. But we smooth out difficulties, we relieve stress, we correct mistakes, we take up other men's burdens, and by our efforts make possible the peaceful life of men in a peaceful state." The peaceful life of men in a peaceful state. I think the Bar Association of India is wedded as a company of lawyers to ensure that we are all committed to the peaceful life of human beings and in a peaceful state. And many more. I keep reading it again and again. I find the riches and the treasure that I can gather. Probably one day, when I have a little more time, I would not only write a few editorial notes on this, probably pen a poem on what a lawyer's life can be if it's like more than the adventure of Columbus. And in a way, Mr. Nariman was a Columbus in his own way. So let us be all those great explorers of the physical world. Let's become explorers of the justice world. Exploring the justice world is a huge task. But I suppose the Bar Association of India is committed to that. And it's truly fitting today that we are gathered to honor and pay tributes to a great person who explored the world of justice. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.